Welcome to your week 13 video. This week, we will be talking about engineering ethics, and we will continue this very important conversation into week 14. Engineering ethics might be the one singular, most important conversation that we have during this course. I know that we have had lots of important conversations like design thinking, engineering design, sustainable engineering design, but I think that engineering ethics really is the foundation that should inform all the designs that you will create or carry out as engineers. So please do pay particular attention to this week's video and subsequent engineering ethics conversations. So let's start first with the definition of ethics. When you hear the word ethics, what comes to mind? What is ethics? So I'm sure you thought about lots of different words: integrity, morale, honesty, right or wrong, conscience, responsibility, values, and all those words that you thought of are correct. In its very simplistic form, we say that ethics is a system of moral principles. And I'm sure that you must be wondering, what does ethics have to do with engineering? Ethics has a lot to do with engineering, because just like doctors and nurses take the Hippocratic Oath to cause no harm, engineers also take a similar oath to protect the interest of the public and the society. As engineers, you will design systems and processes that people will use. And it is extremely important that the foundation and the core of your design is based on ethical principles to cause no harm, to ensure the safety of the users of your products and processes, and even more importantly, to ensure the safety and the interest of the public and society. So in a nutshell, ethics ensures that engineers are the guardians of the society, because look around you, we design pretty much everything that people use. And so I think even more important than any profession is engineering ethical guidelines, and extremely important that as engineers, you stick to these ethical guidelines. So again, back to the definition of what ethics is: a system of moral principles, and we will be looking at those set of moral principles in week 14. And then ethics is also concerned with what is good for individuals and society. And it is also described as moral philosophy. So just moral principles, moral guidelines, looking at what is good for individuals, but overarching even more for society. Ethics are important to all engineers. Just because of what I explained in the previous slide, as engineers, you design equipment, processes, systems that doctors use, nurses use, lawyers use. And so really most professions are really dependent on the work of engineers. And if these professions are called to abide by ethical standards, how much more so engineers? We need to abide by a very high standard of ethical conduct. So all engineers are expected to maintain very high standards of ethical conduct. And we will be going through the ethical conduct that has been prescribed for all engineers by the NCEAS. NCEAS means the National Council of Examiners for Engineering and Surveying. I hope I didn't put 3 E's there. It's NCEES, yes. And so This council prescribes the model rules of professional conduct for all engineers. I would strongly encourage you to check out the website for NCES. You could Google it and save it as a favorite, because if you want to pursue your professional engineering license or your engineering and training license, the NCES set those exams. They are the ones that set the exams for your professional engineering license and your engineering and training license. For those of you that want to go down that career pathway to get those licenses, is not mandatory for all engineers. Depending on where you work, you might be required to have that license. But again, please, if you have any questions regarding this, send me an email or come to office hours. So let's continue our conversation about engineering ethics. I just mentioned NCS so that you understand that this is actually a set of ethical code of conduct that has been set up by a professional organization. It's not just code of conduct that anyone comes up with. The NCS has set up the professional code of conduct for engineers. Again, like we talked about in the previous slides, ethics are concerned with standards, rules or guidelines for moral and socially approved conduct, which include some of these extremely important conduct and characteristics of being honest. As engineers, we're called to be honest because the world has entrusted us with the designs of products that they use. And so as engineers, there's absolutely no lie for us to lie or falsify data. Later on, I hope that you can watch the video that I have uploaded on YouTube and see how the engineer in that animated video was being pushed or pressured by their manager to lie and falsify or trim data. And these are some experiences that you will go through in industry as engineers, but please remember that you're called to be ethical engineers and you're called to be honest and trustworthy. Your word is your honor as engineers, so please be trustworthy. If you cannot meet a particular deadline, it is important that you communicate that to your supervisor or manager to let them know that you're unable to meet the deadline and you need an extension. Extremely important is the last bullet point on acting in the best interest of society. As engineers, like I mentioned earlier, you are sort of guardians of the society to ensure that all the products and services being designed are in the best interest of society. And if they're not, you're called to be whistleblowers. And later on next week, when we go through the NCES guidelines, we will talk about this in more detail and talk about what is society, who is society, and who is our public, and also how you can follow due process to ensure that all the designs, all the products and services from engineers are really for the best interest of society. For this course, we will be focusing on engineering ethics. There are lots of different ethical code of conduct from different professions, but it's important for us to understand that we're focusing on engineering ethics. And so we will be looking at engineering type examples. For example, using a substandard grade of steel in the construction of a bridge is definitely a violation of ethical standards. However, getting an inferior brand of ketchup from, say, Subways or KFC is not an ethical violation, at least within the context of engineering. So please, let's have that mental framing regarding the sort of ethical issues that we will be taking a look at in the course in the next couple of weeks. There have to be engineering ethical violations. We're looking at engineering professional code of conduct, not for any other industry. So another extremely important point that I'd like to raise is the fact that ethics is different from matters of legality and legal standards. And so sometimes you will find that though a particular scenario or issue does not violate a legal standard because there's no legal standard at that point in time, it could violate an ethical standard. As engineers, you're called to make sure that your ethical standards supersede any other standards, because if you abide by the ethical standards, chances are that you will not be violating a legal standard. And if you watch the video that I have posted, where the engineer was being pressured to falsify data on electronic waste dumping, it turns out that in that particular state, electronic waste dumping was not illegal. However, the engineer very well knew that that would violate his ethical standards. And so what the engineer had to do was abide by the ethical code of conduct for engineers, even though at that point in time, he wouldn't necessarily be violating a legal standard because there was no legal standard banning electronic waste dumping. So I hope that that explains that the fact that ethics is different from matters of legality. It is important also to note that different organizations, different professional groups, different communities of practice have their own ethical standards. And like I mentioned earlier on, we will be focusing more on engineering standards. I explained about ethical standards being different from legal standards. It's also important to note that sometimes our ethical standards might conflict with our personal standards or a personal set of values. It is extremely important for you as engineers, practicing engineers, to be able to identify this when you have a personal standards conflict with ethical standards, and you're called to suppress your personal standards in favor of ethical standards. And next week, when we look at the NCES Code of Conduct properly, I will be giving some examples of this where one's personal standards could potentially conflict with ethical standards, and how you could suppress your personal standards in favor of ethical standards. But extremely important to note this because you will experience this in industry. In conclusion, again, just reiterating, because later on in the semester, you will have an assignment based on engineering ethics. I just want to emphasize that we are talking about engineering ethics, in particular, not medical ethics, not nursing ethics, not hospitality ethics. We're talking about engineering ethics because most engineering ethical issues applied from the general ethical standards. But please, when we start having conversations for you to give examples of ethical standards, I would really like you to give engineering ethical standards or engineering ethical violations, not examples in other occupations. And examples of those sort of engineering ethical violations could be using a substandard grade of steel for the design of a bridge or a building, the design of a jumbo jet that was faulty and had a technical fault in the design. So all those are different examples of engineering ethical standards. Chernobyl, the issue with Chernobyl, that is a very topical engineering violation. And there are lots of different types of engineering ethical violations. Volkswagen trimming of data, falsifying of data regarding the carbon emissions from one of their diesel models. That was an ethical violation. So what I'd like you to do in Microsoft Teams is for each person to give an example of an engineering ethical violation. I'd like you to post this on Microsoft Teams, the main chat for the class, not your Lab 3 Microsoft Teams channels, but in the larger Microsoft Teams class chat. Each person, please post an example of engineering ethical violation for the whole class to see. And it could just be an image, or if you have a short video clip to show it, or if you want to text it out, type it out, and give an example, just like I gave the example of Volkswagen and the example of Chernobyl or the Titanic. Those are all examples of engineering ethical violations. But I'd like you to just give a brief explanation on what the ethical violation actually was. Ethics has to do with choosing what is right or wrong. The world depends on you as engineers. The world trusts you as engineers. It is important that in your decisions, you always choose to do what is right, what is in the best interest of society, so that engineering will continue to be a noble profession that it is, of highly respected and ethical people. So we will continue this conversation next week, week 14, and wrap it up then. And then at the end of that particular lecture in week 14, I will issue an assignment for you to start thinking about, which will be due during finals week. Please, if you have any questions, send me an email, or better still, come to office hours. Looking forward to seeing you then. Happy Thanksgiving weekend. Thank you, bye.